the Harrison Butker, whatever
the Catholic, the football kicker?
Yeah. If I would have heard his speech at graduation, I probably would have given him a standing ovation. I would have been crying and like so excited. Like that's all, like I just want to be a mom. Like I still feel like that's my whole purpose in life.
Right.
But that didn't happen.
Right.
So like, what am I going to do until that point? I'm not just going to traipse through life and live a mediocre, like, well, I'm just going to sit and wait around.
Yeah, totally.
Like I'm going to, what am I feeling passionate about? I'm going to pursue that to my highest calling. I realize now there's multiple callings in my life, and like, yeah, but it's still, I can't not have that in my mind.
I totally get it. So just hearing you say like, you know, I have multiple things going on, multiple passions. You really.
Are we recording, by the way? I'm like,
yeah,
wait. I'm like, should I say that again? I was saving more of it because I was like, oh, if we're going to get into it, I'll save the good stuff for later.
No, you are good. But it's interesting because you have had a lot of different careers now, or you've been successful and made a name for yourself in different categories, and some of them actually don't very easily cross over, right? Sports broadcaster. Were you doing anything on the sports side or just broadcasting?
It was broadcasting.
Okay.
Yeah.
So broadcasting, content creation. I know you're heavy on the branding and strategy side, working with influencers, real estate bureau, coaching. None of it was planned, huh?
None of it was planned, but in hindsight, it all makes sense.
Right.
Like I even think about going back to even high school and thinking about like, who do I want to be? Not when I grow up, but like, who do I want to be in school? And I remember I went through a horrible traumatic experience my freshman year that I would never wish on anybody. And I had a decision after that of like, okay, am I going to be the victim here, or am I going to take the narrative of my story? And I didn't realize that was probably the first time in my life where I had a rebrand. I got to decide, how do I want the world to see me, and where do I want my life to go? And that was a moment where I really took charge and saw something bigger than me. I decided my freshman year, I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to go to California. I'm going to go to LA. For me, TV was an escape. And so I was like, I'm going to be that one day. And that was when I look back on that moment, and I feel like so much of what I do is actually related to that girl wanting to redesign her life and take control of how people saw her. And so often we want to blame everybody else for our circumstances. And that to me was proof of I can change my life and who I want to be.
Are you comfortable talking about what that traumatic incident was?
To some extent, yes. But in a very short time span, there was a friend of mine who committed suicide. I went through a horrible breakup relationship where the person who was my best friend sexually assaulted me. And within a day of that, found out that he was actually cheating on me the entire time. Within a day of that, found out that so many people in my life actually knew what was happening, and I was the only person who didn't. And when I tried to seek help, when I tried to seek guidance in my friends, they flipped it on me, where it wasn't. Because let's think about like the narrative now, even this is taking like totally different direction perhaps from where you thought it was going, but like so often when we look at women and in relationships and why did she stay or why did she leave and whose fault was it, and did she call it upon herself or was it something that she truly was a victim in those circumstances? I mean, this was now 20 years ago, and at that time I sought help from a friend, and what ended up happening was all of a sudden the whole world thought I was a slut. Like I was the one who was easy. I was the one who, well, you hung out with him, so you brought that upon yourself. And so for me, I did what was best in that moment, where it was, okay, I can try to fight against that, or maybe even go to my police or to the parents or to the administration. And again, in that time and space, most often women were not believed. So I could have that target on my back of I was the girl who, and instead I said, fine, I'm going to own it. Whatever you want to call me, fine. And I took that time to figure out, all right, if you're going to have that idea of who I am, I'm going to show you that you're wrong. And so I went from being completely depressed, anxious, all of my grades dropped after being like the pristine, ideal student. Like I was like C's, D's, flunking out of school. And in that moment, I decided I'm gonna do it different. Like if you don't want to be my friend, that's fine. If you want to call me names, that's fine. But I'm gonna take control of my body and my grades and my choices. And if you want to hop along with me, great. If not, then that's fine. And that was
life-changing.
Yeah.
Did you stay in the school the entire time?
I did. I fully stayed in school the entire time. And it was a horrible, like I went to a small private school. So rumors would swirl and parents would talk. And and I think this is also something that now, and probably why I deal so well with comments, people get so flustered where they see like, oh, people are lying about me, or they think that I'm this horrible person. I need to apologize. I need to go on the apology tour. That's not me. And I think I realized in that moment, like people are gonna lie about you. And the ones who really know who you are gonna stick with you. And the ones who don't, they're gonna go with everyone else, or they're gonna take the popular opinion, whatever makes sense. And so it was also a very early learning moment for me to recognize what real relationships look like, what real friendships look like, because I even had friends who all of a sudden they were no longer allowed to hang out with me because they thought, oh, Giselle's the party girl, she hangs out with all the boys, she's easy, she's a slut, which was not at all the case, but that was something that I had to learn how to be okay with that.
Right.
Know in my heart what was true. That was also, I feel like, when I had always been raised around Christian values, but that was for me a moment, like a God moment for me. And I always say to anybody, listen, you don't have to believe what I believe. You can believe in God, you can believe in puppies. And, dog is God spelled backwards. I don't think that's a coincidence either, but that for me though was a moment where I realized I survived this. Why? Like I went through this at a really, really young age. Like why? And I could have been like, why me? But instead it felt like, I feel like I'm supposed to do something bigger. Right. I don't think this is the end. And there were just a handful of consecutive moments where I felt like, okay, I was disappointed. I was rejected. I got slapped in the face. I got brought to my knees. I'm still here though. I want to explore what that looks like.
Right.
And it's, I feel like those moments of reinvention, of picking myself up, of believing that there's something bigger, of when things don't go my way, going, okay, so then what's the other way?
Right.
That has made sense.
Okay, so when you're going through that, like where I agree with you is once you've gone through a trial and you experience kind of the person you become on the other side, makes it easier the next time you go in it. But the first time, that's kind of your fork in the road.
Oh my gosh.
Right? Am I going to move forward or am I going to be trapped here? So, and I think this is for anyone listening who hasn't gone through it yet. When that originally happened, right? I'm assuming that you didn't just, get labeled this and all of a sudden, 2 seconds later, you were like, okay, I'm going on a rebrand. You probably had a moment of like it getting pretty dark and challenging and having to figure out what to do from there. When you were in that dark moment, right? Was there a point where you were trying to find the path forward? Is there a point where you just real quickly realized, okay, I'm on my knees. You brought up God, like, God, what am I doing here? Like, what was it like and how could somebody get through it who hasn't gone through a big trial so far?
Yeah, well, first of all, there was even the part of a lot of my friends had abandoned me, and this person who did this to me was the only person who didn't. So where a lot of people don't understand, oh, why does she stay? Or, oh, like, well, it can't have been bad if you're still spending time with him. But when you become isolated or when people isolate you, well, it becomes really easy to then latch onto the things that aren't good for you. And that's true of so many aspects of our life. And that's why, bullying people, even in terms of like political conversation. That's not the right thing to do. The last thing you want is for someone to isolate. So what made it really hard was the only person I could turn to in that moment was the person who had done this to me. And so that led me down an even darker, deeper path of really thinking that I was amounting to nothing, and that I had zero self-worth whatsoever. And I really do feel like I then went into my own destructive behavior, where at a very young age was like, fine, I guess I will party a little bit, or I will stay out past curfew, or I will try to sneak out, or I will be rebellious. And I feel like there was the movie 13 came out, and it's like a cult sensation. But there was a moment where I felt like she hit rock bottom, and she had this this beautiful moment with her mom, where her mom was just trying to save her. And I can't remember what happened first, the movie or what I went through, but I remember identifying with that movie. And I remember a distinct moment where I just felt like I was running from myself, and I came home one day and I was completely in tears, and I was screaming at my mom, like the one time I'd ever told my mom that I hated her. And we come from like a very loving family that does not raise our voice. And like I was screaming and telling her how much I hated her, and she just like held me in my bed, and we just like cried, and she just like held me like a little baby. And I don't think I'd let her hold me in such a way in maybe years, because I was also going through that, like, I don't need you, mom, like I'm too cool for you. And I just felt like it was this moment of having to be like, you can't run anymore. And I just needed to have a moment of pause and listening to my thoughts. And also I think in that moment I realized how much family meant to me. And I think I also hated the fact that I couldn't tell my mom. I didn't tell my mom. I still haven't had the full conversation with my parents. And I've talked about it publicly on stage. I've even gone into more details too. And I feel like that's something that like, I don't know if I could ever have that conversation. Like, I feel like that would then ruin me being her little girl forever. But I do feel like I had to hit this moment of rock bottom of like, there's literally nowhere else for me to go.
Right.
So am I going to keep going in this direction, and now I'm going to like end it now? Like that crossed my mind. Like, do I just want to die? Do I just want to not be here? And I feel like it was a combination of my mother's love and grace, having that whisper in prayer of like, you're not done yet. Like, you're just not done yet. And then having just moments, whether it was seeing something on TV or seeing, somebody else having that comeback story, where I used that and music, and that's what slowly helped me come back out of it. But what I think, there are two surprises that I would say that I'd had. One, you think you know what you're going to do when something bad happens to you. You think, even listening to this conversation, you might think, I would never let a man do that to me. I would fight, I would scream, and the thing that I think surprised me the most is I froze. I didn't expect that to happen at all. Like, I completely froze. Like, you think you know exactly how you're going to react. You think you know exactly how you're going to pick up the pieces. You think you know exactly what's going to happen, like, in your head. But when something that traumatic happens to you, your brain is no longer yours. And I had to go through that for sure. But then the other piece, and I'm like even forgetting what I was about to say there.
The two surprises.
So there was I didn't know what I was gonna do. I can't remember what the other part was though. I've totally blanked out now.
Okay, so
but
I'll say something, and then if you remember it, just jump right back in. So it sounds like and this is similar to my experience. You hit rock bottom. You got to hit the bottom.
Yeah.
And then at the bottom, you have a choice. And it's either move forward and start taking slow steps, or just accept that this is life forever.
Yeah.
Right? What did you start discovering as you started making steps towards, what I think you view as your purpose for continuing?
Yeah. It's not linear. That was the other piece, is that it wasn't, and I think this is so important to recognize. I hope no one ever experiences what I went through to the extent of that. And that also was not the last time that something like that ever happened, unfortunately. But it was never linear. It wasn't like, okay, now I've hit rock bottom and it's all up from here. if anything, it was that I had to go up and down this path and also date some awesome human beings to show me what like love really was. And also I accidentally dated some horrible human beings that were very similar, if not wearing a different outfit. And I was tricked into thinking what it was supposed to be. And I would even recognize certain areas of my life, whether it was school or business or my friendships or my personal life, where there was a part of my voice that was silenced after that moment where I didn't want to speak up for myself. And even now, 20 years later, I will still have moments come up where I go, oh shit, I didn't even realize I haven't healed that part of myself. Like there was something that I didn't even recognize until I think it was probably the 15-year mark, where I went to a conference and I don't remember what the exercise was. I just remember sitting there going, I have not yet forgiven myself for how I handled that. And I didn't realize that all of this time I was thinking, how do I forgive the person who hurt me? Or how do I move on? How do I get stronger? And I didn't realize there was even a part of I had to forgive myself for doing the best that I could. Right. Where again, you think, oh, why didn't you go to the police? Why didn't you go to the principal? Why didn't you go to your parents? There's so many reasons why I didn't. Like, I didn't want to be known as that for my whole high school career. I didn't want to have to switch schools. I didn't want to risk my parents getting into trouble. Like I was running all these things through my head. And so people would say, oh, why? If you've been in that situation, you know all of the reasons why you maybe would not. And I didn't realize I had to forgive myself for handling it as best as I possibly could. And even if I had to go back, I would not have done a single thing differently other than maybe moving sooner.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask, is if you could go back now, would you have wanted it to have turned out any differently? Because arguably that could have been a significant turning point in your life. And, you had mentioned this before we started, that, you're not a mom yet, but ultimately like some boy you want to be. And for us, we never want our children to go through challenges or trials and tribulations, but it's the adversity that they face as kids, that we all face as kids, that have really shaped our characters to mold us into the people that we become. For me, it was my dad walking away from us when I was 12 or 13 at the time. And so like in my key adolescent years, I didn't have a father around. And he dragged my mom through court. He had a lot of money. We had nothing. We went from rags to riches, back to rags. But what he did helped shape the father that I am now with my kids. And so I don't know if that hadn't happened, if I would still be the same dad that I am today. But I now even look at my kids, and I fall victim to this too, where I don't want them to have frustration or sadness or despair. But at the same time, I know that they're going to need that in order to become strong adults. And if they don't have it, it's inevitable that something's going to happen that's going to cause a setback. I'd rather it happen when they're younger so that I can at least help guide them down the path. But if you were to take it back, you wouldn't have changed how it planned out?
There are little bits and pieces and moments or conversations that I perhaps wish that I would have had differently with friends. But in terms of how I handled that situation specifically, I really feel like I needed, as horrible as it sounds, like, did you need to go through, as horrible as it sounds, I really do, because it's given me a level of empathy where in this world where people are very quick to judge everything, you think one thing and all of a sudden that swallows your whole personality. Well, if you think one thing, you must think 100 different things. Oh, if you did that. And I really feel like, especially as a coach, especially as a speaker, especially as a content creator, I really don't see a lot of things in black and white. And I feel like that has become a superpower for me. Has it taken me a little longer, and have I experienced a lot of pain? Because like I said, that's not the worst thing that's ever happened to me, actually. Right. But it was one of the biggest things that happened to me. And at that age in your life where you're trying to figure out who you are, and the hormones are going crazy, and high school is awful for most people. But you mentioned even with me having children, would I wish that on my children? Absolutely not. Right. And also, I feel like my mom and I have this unspoken connection where she is someone who I feel comfortable communicating with. She is someone who she is so unconditionally loving and has positioned herself to be that person of, you can tell me anything, right? I do. That doesn't mean that I'm going to.
Right.
And I also believe that she knows the things that I don't tell her, that there's this unspoken understanding of, you need to figure this out and you're gonna figure this out. And there have also been moments where, fast forward into college, there were times where I reached out and asked her for help and felt like I was really struggling, whether it was disordered eating or just like my anxiety. And there were times when she was like, you just need to figure it out. And she wasn't saying that in a like, screw you, like too bad. She was doing it, I feel like, for my own good, where she was like, I fully, wholeheartedly believed that you were going to figure it out. If I legitimately felt like you were in danger, she'd be on a flight in an hour, in an instant. Right. And I feel like it was one of the things that she either really intentionally or accidentally did really well as a parent, is when I was hurting, she was there and she was present. But she was never going to try to prevent me from experiencing what I needed to develop the strength to become the problem-solving, functioning, loving adult that I've become.
100. Well, that's that really is the goal of parents, right? The goal of parents is not to make money for your kids, to be the wall so that nothing challenging ever happens to them, right? Our job is to just give them the tools for them to go out and do. And unfortunately, in this world, like, there's going to be trials. There's going to be things that, like, I know my kids are going to go through that are going to suck, right? Our goal is to give them the tools to get through it, and then it be, them become stronger or go through the refining fire along the way. Doesn't mean it's easy, right? No. We see it a lot of times just because we're in the financial space. Yeah. We see it on the money side where, a lot of people will kind of take the outlook of, I didn't have anything as a kid, so I'm going to give my kids everything I didn't have, right? And I'm going to have the funds and the trust, and that's going to give it, they'll never have to work again. That's a disservice, right? Like, I don't think that's like true leadership as a parent. Like, I think you're kind of stripping a lot of the joy that your child can have growing into a man or a woman and going out and building something. There's a lot of purpose in that. Mm-hmm. I want to ask you a question because we took our kids to, it was called the Children's Hunger Fund last weekend. And we're kind of, with my older two, getting to the point where we want to not only show them, like, look, let's be grateful for what we have, because there's a lot of people out there struggling, like really struggling. And two, we wanted to like just get them in like more of a servant kind of mindset and doing. And one of the people there that was working was talking about depression, right? And she was going through depression, she was going through anxiety, and she said, the best thing that I ever did, and if you're somebody who's struggling with depression, the best thing you can go do is go help somebody. Go find somebody who's struggling and go serve them. And kind of her experience was, I got so much purpose in helping someone else, and all of a sudden I wasn't obsessed or consumed with my challenges. I was now adding value to somebody who's going through a tough time. Any experience on that as well?
I feel like getting out of the house in general is great, but yeah, I totally think that being able to have conversation and connection with people in any way, shape, or form, but certainly helping people, being in that place of service. One of the best things that my mom, again, we love you, Mom, that she also did was, at a young age, she brought me to Special Olympics. And I was volunteering with all of these athletes, not just children, like athletes who had different physical and mental disabilities. And also, like, some of them were really intelligent and challenged me in ways that I wasn't expecting. And it was just outside of my box, outside of my ordinary. Because there are also instances where service can become very manufactured and superficial, because I also dealt with that too in high school, going to a private school where people are just checking off the boxes. They want to be eligible to get into the really good school, and like, you're volunteering, but you're not actually physically present and there. And it was, I felt like when I was only 10 years old, and it was a place of volunteering for me that I still am involved with to this day. But I wasn't just, taking tickets or, passing out lunches or scooping things. It was that I was connecting, and I was there, and I was meeting people. And I also recognized that where a lot of my friends who I'd bring were so uncomfortable, and yet I felt like these are my people. Like, I felt so dialed in. I was able to communicate with athletes who were deaf and blind and had Down syndrome. And like, for some reason I felt like we had this way of communicating. And so with that, it's important that if you're going to be of service, you have to feel that connection. You have to feel that value. You have to feel like you're giving back. And you also can't come from a place of thinking that you're better than the people who are there.
Right.
Like, oh, there's starving children in this world who are less fortunate than you are. Like, that puts you on such a pedestal to the rest of the world. Right. So I absolutely believe, though, that having something that can pull you outside of yourself, get you to be fully present in yourself. I even think about, I was just talking about this at a fundraiser that we did for Special Olympics, where I forgot to take a picture. And I'm like, I always forget to take a picture. I always do, because I'm in it. I'm there, I'm fully present, I'm with these people. I'm not doing it just to be seen. I'm doing it because I want to help. My hands are tied. And so that's, I feel like, the key part of it, of like pulling yourself out. You have to feel like you're contributing to the world, or you're on a path that's beyond bigger than you.
Yeah, do it for the right reasons, or don't do it at all.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry.
That's awesome that you're doing that with your kids.
Yeah, well, we're like, as we talk about the idea of like wanting to give your kids something you didn't have, right? I'm now dealing with something very new that was a different struggle than my parents dealt with. And that's, we have stuff available for the kids. Like, I'm in a position to like create a very comfortable life for them. I'm very grateful that my parents didn't do that for me, though, right? Like, I wouldn't be doing this with you today. And so, my kids are around, my oldest is 11 and the next in line is 9, and they're just at that age where like they don't totally know what like true value of much is, right? And so, we're going through that exercise. We've entered the parenting
exercise. I love how you call it an exercise.
Well, it's interesting because, like, as parents, like, we're entering a new stage. In this new stage, we don't have experience with. This is the first time we're doing it, So we're working through it.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, I have 2 older brothers. My brothers are 9 to 10 years older than me. And so what I like to say is that we have the same biological parents, but we had completely different parenting.
100%.
Because my dad was one of 9, my mom was one of 5, like basically came from nothing. And my mom didn't go to college. And when they were born, my dad was in residency. And they were also both born in Mexico. My dad went to medical school in Mexico because he couldn't find opportunities here. And my mom was a full-time business owner. She owned a dance studio. When she was 14 years old, she started teaching dance classes out of her garage or in parking lots or wherever there was an open space. And that became her business. And she supported my dad through all of his, career pursuits. And so with my brothers, they had like full-time working dad, full-time working mom. Whereas when I was born, my mom stopped working. I only knew mom as full-time mom. And I should probably add, she's probably going through a little bit of an identity crisis too, because she was used to running her own business for decades. And then all of a sudden she's this like, I'm her business. Like, right. That's it. And she bent over backwards for me and would do anything. And also when they were growing up, our running joke cuisine of our family is huevo con weenie, which is just like eggs and like Oscar Mayer wieners. Okay. Like that's like the fancy breakfast that will never be too good for. But like, they grew up and what they could afford, very different from when I was born. And I also had a lot more attention. I was the only girl, youngest by a lot. I had a good blend of being one of the boys and then also like kind of being a little bit of only child. And, but if it makes you feel any better, I was probably the most spoiled child and yet the first to become completely self-sufficient.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but it was because of like the constant reminders and saying where they came from. Like they really, my mom was born in Mexico. My dad's Tex-Mex. So I say the border crossed them. They didn't cross the border.
Right.
And they really ingrained in us, like from a very early age, like you are so lucky to be an American. Like you are so lucky to be born here, to get to grow up here. Like they really put that, and if you work really hard, you can be whatever you want to be. And maybe to a delusional extent, but that is why it's called a dream. You know, like they really taught us from a very early age, whatever you want to do, whatever you want to be, like you can be that. And I fully believe one of my competitive advantages is that I had 2 parents who loved me unconditionally, Never questioned that ever. But to the point to where, and kind of going back to what you said earlier, I still then went to therapy because I felt like I didn't deserve any of this. Like, why did I get this? Like, why didn't this person get this? Or why didn't that person get this? And I had to even learn or be told by people, well, listen, like if I have $20 to invest in someone, I'm glad that it's going to you. Or I know that you're going to do something really awesome with my money, or I know that you're going to multiply this or serve other people, and you're going to like use the tools to your advantage. And so all of that is to say, you're going to be fine. Your kids are going to be fine.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Build me up. You said something I think is really important. And the reason I'm going to bring this up is because, as you talk about when you start creating content and the comments, and, we talk so much about money and investing, we definitely will see in the comment section, well, yeah, but you're either privileged or you got money from your parents, or I'll never have that. I grew up with parents just like you. My parents absolutely made me believe that anything I wanted to accomplish, I could. So I had that like ideology going in. Okay, it's possible. For those that didn't have parents like that, right? For those that grew up that had parents that like, you'll never be shit, right? You got to work 4 times as hard as everyone else, and you're never going to go anywhere. What do you do? How do you help them? Like, how do you show them like, no, you are actually the one holding yourself back? Do you work with any? I mean, I know you're working with a lot of business clients, but do you work with anybody just trying to break through the delusion that their parents gave them?
All of the time, whether it's audiences that I have or clients, or even in the comments too, where I fully recognize I had those 2 awesome humans as parents. At the same time though, there's still your mindset up here. Like right. My parents could believe in me as much as they wanted to, but if I don't, it doesn't really make a difference. And I will say that just because they believed in me unconditionally doesn't mean my mom is still that mom who worries about anything she can. She worries about anything and everything that she can. And there have been hundreds of times where they've said, are you sure you want to post that? Or you should take that down. Or don't talk about your trauma. Don't talk about your anxiety. You're never going to get hired, which now that's fine. I don't really need to get hired by anyone, but thanks so much. Are you sure you want to start a business in the middle of the pandemic? Are people really going to buy from you? Like, how are your clients doing? They still project their fears onto me. And I recognize that's very different from perhaps coming from an abusive household or from parents that didn't just not love you, but perhaps told you that you were going to be shit. And I don't know, I can't speak to that firsthand experience. And there are going to be people who listen to this who say, screw you, I'm not going to listen to anything that you say because you don't understand. But here's my question to you is, do I not understand, or are you being committed to being misunderstood? Because there have been plenty of times in my life where maybe it hasn't been the parents, but where maybe I have gone through something absolutely horrible that I wouldn't wish upon anybody, and someone tried to help, and I was committed to shutting everybody else out. And I was committed to being in my own little box of misery because I was in a place too of, well, as long as I keep my standards low, I'll never be disappointed. Like that, there's that too. And so my challenge would just really be to ask yourself, is this really all there is? And is this really all that you want? Because it does go deeper, and we see it now, and I'm sure you see it in sports too, that the ones who are becoming more self-aware and who are recognizing the power that you have over your mind, they are the ones who, they are surpassing greatness to a totally different level. And really ask yourself, I even think about, I'm the one who's single with no kids, but I'm also the cool auntie who goes to the playground with my friends and their kids. And it's so interesting to me how you'll have one mom or dad, parent, whatever, who will say, now be careful, the slide's really slippery, make sure you wear your sunscreen, make sure and then you have the other ones who are like, okay, go have fun. The difference between the kids who are careful versus the ones who just go balls to the wall, run on the monkey bars, scrape their knees, whatever, it's crazy. And I would ask you, if you're listening to this, like, where is that showing up in your life? Where is it what your parents told you or warned you about, saying the world is out to get you, the world is against you, or that you are not made for this world? Okay, well, let's just say, challenge. What if for even a day or a week or a month, you lived your life or woke up and flipped whatever that challenge is? What if instead of saying you're never going to amount to anything, what if you flipped it and said you're going to amount to everything you could ever imagine? Or what if it was instead, the world would be so lucky to know you? Because even I grew up in Minnesota. Like I grew up in a not farm town by any means, but compared to LA, smaller town. And there was no one who looked like me, like being this Mexican, olive skinned, big haired girl. And I could have taken that as like, oh, and I totally wanted to be blonde. I totally wanted to be like really skinny and pale. And I absolutely, but instead, like I could look at it as I want to be like everybody else, or what are the things that make me different?
Right.
Or if there are reasons that people don't like me for what I look like, or for the language that's spoken at our house, or for where my family comes from, okay, great. They're going to hold on to that. But what if I showed up as they would be so lucky to know me, or they would be so lucky to be introduced to me, or there's a gift that I can bring into the world? You're going to behave differently. And I think that's what a lot of people, even when they say, oh, you're the white guy and stale pale and whatever. Okay, well, like what if you carried yourself, like whatever you think that is,
right,
whatever audacity that you believe that to be, how would your life change? And I guarantee you it would change significantly more than you pointing out all of the things that are wrong or right about Mikey Taylor.
Right.
So like the ability to channel that energy would be my challenge to anyone who, regardless of what that limiting belief is, recognizing that's a story that you're telling yourself and not a reality of the world. And if it truly is a reality of the world, okay, what are you going to do about it?
Right. Yeah, it's so good. Like for anybody watching this that remembers what it was like being a kid who had a parent who was paranoid, right? And before I say this, like my mom, my grandma, I love them to death.
Yeah.
My grandma was super paranoid, and that bled over to my mom, right? So I grew up in the beginning being the kid that like my mom just never wanted anything bad to happen, didn't want to get hurt, was very concerned. And as I got older, like that was bleeding into, especially becoming a skateboarder, right? Like when I was skateboarding, like so much of it is fear-based. Like we get broke off. And I remember getting so frustrated, like, oh my gosh, I'm so scared to do everything because of my grandma and my mom, right? And I remember I got
Just to do it in secret? Like how did you even,
I had to learn how to lie to myself, actually. Like
Okay.
there was a okay.
but did they know that you were skateboarding? Because I feel like my mom would be like,
Okay, so look.
hold my hand or
Here's-
only go.
Look, it's funny because you and I had a lot of similar experiences, but we got there in such different ways, right? Like for me, I played, some conventional sports in the beginning and it was fine. And then I started playing hockey, right? And I didn't grow. Like I went through puberty at like 17 coming into 18. All my friends did 13. So I'm playing hockey and I'm the little guy and I'm the captain and I was the best on the team. And my mom stopped going to games because everybody was huge and they'd all just destroy me. Right?
And her anxiety was just like,
So that was like the first step. My mom can't go watch me get beat up, right? And then I started skateboarding. When I started skating, it wasn't necessarily that it was dangerous, like she was concerned about that, but in the 90s, skateboarding was like very raw. Like only like the bad kids skated. And so she got hit with like a double where I was doing something that was dangerous and now none of my friends' parents wanted them to hang out with me because I was now the skater kid, right? But where it got bad for me I wouldn't say where it got bad for me. Where I lucked out is I'm so competitive and I really don't like losing that put me in a position of going, okay, I'm scared and I've had like, a whole childhood of like mom and grandma telling me like not to get hurt. I was so mad at that I tried to reverse it. Right. And I remember in the beginning, like I would just have to lie to myself over and over. You can do this. You're not going to get hurt. You can do this. And not overnight, but probably 6 years in, I started believing that I could actually do it. And so I watched like a lie turn into my reality, and the reality was much better than what it was prior.
yeah.
But it was hard. It took time.
But but the things that we tell ourselves, it's so powerful. And so many of my clients don't even realize some of the little things that they do. For example, even if it's, oh, I'm such an idiot, I shouldn't have done that. you're a human. You just made a tiny little mistake,
Right.
or the ways that you dwell on things, or you don't forgive even for the tiniest little things, or you get so pissed off because somebody cuts you off in traffic. Like, we don't realize the self-tape track in our head is what is stronger than any troll, bully, boss, and anything in the world. And that the biggest privilege is having control over your mind. And there have been instances, as I mentioned to you, like going through PTSD, I didn't feel like I had control over my mind some of the times. I felt like it was taking control of me more than I was taking control of it, even being the mind over matter girl.
Right.
And so if you can wake up with a healthy mind and have the capacity to put yourself out, like, that on its own is a competitive advantage that nobody talks about and that a lot of us take for granted. Your health, if you are a healthy human being, like, you aren't dealing with chronic pain, or like you're not, like, that is a huge competitive advantage that nobody talks about. And if you have your health in your mind, which also we have ways to nourish that in ways that people didn't talk about in our 20s, where, like, have you tried sleeping? Have you tried not drinking? You will feel so much. I know you think the medication is going to help, and it can, and I've totally taken it, but have you tried sleeping and not drinking and not hanging out with people who you don't even really like? It will do wonders for your life, for your self-esteem, for your career, for your bank account. Let me tell you. But I love what you talked about, like, being the smallest person in so many of those different instances. Like, I went to this place of I wasn't planning on talking about my mom this whole time, Mikey. Like, I'll just give this to her for Mother's Day. But another thing that she accidentally did so right was when I was, I think, a sophomore or junior in high school, she accidentally put me into a bodybuilding strength conditioning class with all boys. And it was all wrestlers and hockey players. That's what made me think about it. I was the only girl. I wasn't meant to be an only girl. It was supposed to be a co-ed thing. But at that time, girls lifting weights was not the move. Everyone was so afraid of bulking up, and like, skinny was beauty at the time. And I, in that moment, had this dream of, I want to get out of Minnesota. I want to be in LA. I want to be on TV. And I noticed that all of the people who I admired on TV, Oprah Winfrey or Barbara Walters, Maria Menounos, Juliana Rancic, all of them did pageants when they were younger. So I was like, oh, then I should probably do a pageant. And that also is a life hack for anyone. You wanna be like someone, just go check out, like, you can Google them now. It was a lot harder to dig up information about someone back then, but you could maybe see some commonalities, or, oh, what did they do to do that thing? So I saw, oh, they did pageants, and I never considered myself to be a pageant girl, even though I'm a girly girl. And so all of a sudden, here's this girl who's naturally curvy, her body type is different than everybody else, had never lifted a weight in her life. My mom happened to be working out, and she met this trainer who was like, oh, I can help your daughter. Like, she was like, I don't know, like, I'm nervous for her to even do this. I'm scared she's gonna, just have these unhealthy eating patterns or compare herself to all of these girls. And he's like, no. Like, I'm gonna teach her how to be strong, not skinny. And I think immediately she was like, sold. And so I show up, and it was so awesome because for the first time in my life, I was the smallest, where usually if I was in ballet class, for example, I was always the biggest or the tallest, or like, we would all be in the same outfits, and I felt like I was always comparing myself to these other girls. And now, like, I didn't need to compare myself because I was supposed to be the smallest. I was supposed to be the weakest, and that was okay. And then what it did to my self-esteem, where maybe I did lift heavier than a guy, or maybe I was more flexible, or we would be studying for the ACTs or the SATs and I knew the answer and they didn't. It was such an awesome rush and a surprise that built my self-esteem in a way that some of the other moms were like, why would you do that? Like, that's going to be so bad. This is a time when she's most insecure about her body and you're putting her in front of all of these boys. It was the best thing. And it also, now, like, the way that I am in business, I developed such wonderful relationships with boys growing up who were genuinely my friends. And I think that we give the girl who's one of the guys a bad rap for whatever reason. Like, there might be the girl who can't get along with other girls, but if you can have a healthy relationship with the masculine side of the world, like, that actually has been a competitive advantage and just sanity for me throughout all of these years to not be afraid and recognize too, because what I got to see was a lot of these boys and their insecurities. Who knew? Who knew you got like, I thought you guys were just audacious and you could just walk into any room and like put your dick on the table.
We have
like,
our own issues.
Right?
Yeah.
And I would see them, cry after a breakup or a bad test or, feeling self-conscious about what their body looked like or feeling small. And oh my gosh, they're human on the other side, or talking about girls in a way that I was like, no, that's not the case. Like that kind of collaboration is just gold. And so I had no intention of what I was going with that, but I feel like a lot of times we want to win at things. We think that we need to be the strongest at things. And that taught me to look forward to being in rooms where I am the least fill in the blank, least experienced, dumbest person in the room, weakest, has the lowest amount of money, because that's where there can be so much value. And also recognizing that no matter what room you walk into it thinking, what value can I bring? What value do I bring? Because especially if you have no experience at all, you can be the one who boosts the morale, the enthusiasm, the excitement, the hunger for learning. Like that can be the most contagious, most valuable energy in the room ahead of wealth and knowledge.
Yeah, that's a good point. Do you work primarily with men, with women, a combo?
Across the board, like really, truly across the board. And I've been mistaken a couple times of like, like you coach all of these women. I'm like, I coach guys too.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if you read something wrong or you just assumed that because I'm a woman that I only coach women. But no, I coach across the board. I have men and women. I feel like lately, because of some of my content, I talked about how I had an autoimmune disease where I gained 40 pounds really quickly.
Yeah.
And all the body issues that I go through, or even recognizing the season of life that I'm in where, your body can be a miracle before, or even if you don't have kids, you don't have to wait to be chosen. You can choose yourself. I feel like some of those videos will go more viral in the female direction. I've also gone on my own little Swiftie tour this summer. So I've reached a higher caliber of women lately, but it is across the board. And I feel like the women might be more vocal in the comments, but I've got my dudes in the DMs, and even, people we met online,
right. That's right. That's right.
there was a reason or an energy. You could probably speak to that more, but it's pretty across the board. And it's awesome to watch more men, especially in leadership, who are wanting to adopt this new, what I call my action forward leadership, which is what our business is, which is not only that you're forward facing or that you're forward doing, but you're even forward in the way that you think,
right.
Which is part thinking ahead in years, but also emotional intelligence as well.
Yeah, that's what I'm like. It's funny because hearing your backstory and your childhood, it's very obvious why you're doing what you're doing, right? It feels like a lot of the things that you learned through that upbringing, you're now applying in the business world. And you're right, like EQ especially for like leadership, incredibly important, right? 'Cause business is just working with people. And the more blinders you have on, the lower the ceiling is going to be of what you can accomplish, right? So for coaching, some people have coaches, some people don't, right? What have you seen with the people that you've worked with once they bring you on? Is it they see things that they didn't see before, they now are actually growing the business in a way they didn't? Like, what are some of the benefits of hiring a coach?
Oh my goodness, how long do we have? Well, I feel like something that's really humbling is every single person who I work with, whether it's individually or as a group. I mean, I've worked with athletes and award-winning artists and, business owners. I've worked with millionaires. I've worked with billionaires. Every single one of them has a moment where they wonder if the world cares and if their voice matters and if people really want to hear their story, and are they really that exciting, and aren't they kind of boring, and I don't know, this just seems kind of silly. Can I even do this? Every single one. And I like to say that either you have imposter syndrome or you're lying. Like either you have imposter syndrome or you're not growing. Like if you really don't have it, then that probably means that you're super comfortable or complacent in the season of life that you're in right now. But if you have it, that means that you're doing something that you've never done before or that has never been done before. And that might be leaving a business, starting a business, entering parenthood, entering a different season of parenthood. You've now raised, 4 little babies, but you haven't raised 4 teenagers
Correct.
yet.
Correct.
Sorry.
Help me, Lord.
Hug. Or you and your wife have been married for a really long time, but you don't know what empty nesting looks like.
Right.
Yet, and that's still a long ways away. And you've had this business for a really long time, but entering different area, like every single time that you do something new, it's going to trigger those moments of self-doubt. The difference is that some people have previous experiences that they can channel to maybe make those moments shorter or less daunting. Or I like to say my imposter syndrome has gotten louder and darker actually as I get paid more money. But if anything, I now see that imposter syndrome as a friend, or I see it as a green light and a good sign where it's, okay, this is going to propel me forward just as much as I feel like it's going to humble me and ground me in this very moment. But what a coach can do is a lot of people, I say a therapist can help you to look back and unlock what happened to you. A coach can help you to look forward. And I believe that especially in business, it is one session, maybe it's an hour or 30 minutes every single week where you have a space where you're forced to reflect and look back on yourself and have an unbiased person listen to you in the way that maybe your partner or your friend or even some of your colleagues don't have the capacity to, or it would just be inappropriate to speak in that kind of a way to them about maybe other people on your team, or maybe it is your marriage, or maybe it is that doubt that you have in your head that you don't necessarily want them to fully and wholly know about, as transparent as you want to be. And when you find the right coach, because it can't just be any coach, there are absolutely people who, and clients too, who I will turn down and say, you know what, I'm so excited for you. I don't think I'm the right fit, but let me recommend somebody who I think is for what you want to do. But when you can find that person, it is accountability, it is support, it is self-expression. It's also what I believe to be an ongoing toolbox, because the session, I say, it's not the hour that we have together. It starts as soon as you leave. How are you going to take what we talked about this hour and apply it to your life? Because if you're not applying it to your life, then you're just throwing money away, versus how are you taking this hour and then maximizing that to better yourself.
I like that. So you're forcing people to get uncomfortable.
Yes.
Right?
Consensually.
For sure. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But look, I know how it is. Like, we naturally try to fight against discomfort. And if it's not uncomfortable, you're not growing at all. So I'm with you there.
Yeah.
And then, you have somebody that's kind of tracking the accountability as you're going through that process, right? I love that. What's been the most exciting breakthrough you've seen from any client you've had so far?
I had a client who, I'll shout her out because I can. We've talked about this publicly. So Sam Cox was on the season finale of Shark Tank. And she was someone who, when we started working together, what I can say was she was working at a corporate law firm, and she was also in a relationship that had its course. She was also in a business partnership that wasn't really working, and she was in a place of wanting to do something more. And we didn't create her being fully funded on Shark Tank overnight. It was a long process of her learning how to get into the mindset of being an awesome leader and believing that she could be with everything that she already had. It was her leaving her job and leaving something that was really comfortable and that she was really, really good at, to do what she in her heart fully believed she was made to be doing. It was to leave a relationship and to identify what do healthy relationships look like. It was to have really difficult conversations in hiring and firing. And they ended up being, I think it was like the top, if not one of the top funded companies on Indiegogo. They got a deal on Shark Tank. She had gone up to Mark Cuban at South by Southwest and kind of just put it out there to him. And lo and behold, she ended up getting an invitation to come and do that, and to watch them and the millions upon millions of dollars that they're raising, and from huge, huge names, has been wonderful, but most importantly, to see her grow as a person and as a leader, and to have this calmness about her, even with a lot of things in her life that were not going the way that she had hoped or she had planned. She ended up moving across the country. And I think we look at a lot of leaders and we think, oh, well, they're lucky. They everything went right. No, my clients who impress me the most, and I also feel like the most successful people who I know, it's not who they were because they got a check from their parents or because they just happened to be in the right place or the right time. Luck is part of it. I totally believe that, luck or a higher power, I totally believe there's some fate to it, but it's how do you handle yourself when things don't go wrong, or when life slaps you in the face, or when you are forced to start completely over. How do you handle that? And that's what makes the best people and the best leaders.
Yeah, that's really good. Yes.
Or how do you embrace the luck when it comes your way? Because some people have it and they don't take advantage of it.
Yeah, that's right.
That's another one too. People have a really hard time celebrating themselves.
Yeah, that's right. Well, yeah, I think Arnold Palmer, I said this before, the golfer, his quote was, "The more I practice, the luckier I get." Right?
Oh,
You're
yeah.
giving yourself the tools to take advantage of those lucky moments. Like what Mikey just said, like you could be a flash in the pan and a moment happened and you just drop the ball on it. And then the other thing I thought of as you said that, because this is something at least that's specific to our business, we try to create a lot of educational content for investors who are getting started, right? And out of that, there's going to be a group of investors that don't do it themselves. They look for private equity firms, real estate firms, venture, whatever it is, to invest with them. And one thing that we basically share with them is how to do your due diligence, right? And one question that we always recommend they ask when they're talking to let's say a Michael, is tell me about something that went wrong. Tell me about, an investment you made and things that went wrong, and how did you handle it? Right? And you see this kind of light bulb go off with them, because the automatic assumption is if something went wrong, you're not a good operator. But that's not how it works, right? Something going wrong is totally normal. What the investor is learning is how are the people that I want to invest in making decisions when those things go wrong? And then what's the outcome because of it? That's a really, really important thing to note. I love that you brought that up.
And how do you recover from that? How do you roll it off? Because are you someone who, when something goes wrong, you dwell on it? Or is that when you rise to the occasion? Right. And what are the habits that you're doing to support that? Because if you're constantly in stress mode, or if you're constantly flying by the seat of your pants, if you're constantly in fight or flight mode, there are neural pathways in our brain that are blocked when that happens. And if you're burnt out, if you're running on fumes, if you're trying to do everything and all at once, that's not going to work in your favor. Versus even thinking about what are the habits that you are running daily to support you being on your A game, and being really honest with yourself. Even the ones who are saying that, I didn't get a fair shot or a fair start, or I started late. Well, what are you doing in this moment right now to support you being on your A game? And are you actually on your A game? Because there are a lot of people who are running at 50, 60 and wondering, well, why am I not successful? When is it going to happen to me? Like it's a lottery ticket. And there are plenty of people who you could give the lottery ticket to, but if you're not taking care of yourself, if you're not constantly learning, if you're not learning from your failures, if you're not living a lifestyle that can support that, then this will only be temporary for you versus having it be a part of who you actually are.
That's a perfect thing to end on, is what are your daily routines that you're doing to stay on your A game?
Yeah. What is it? How are
No. I'm asking you.
Oh, for me?
You specifically.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So for me, sleep is the most important. And this sounds so silly, but I tell my clients all the time, sometimes the most productive thing that you can do is rest or take a vacation, even if your vacation is at your house doing nothing. Don't work on anything. But I have had to really look at and become obsessed with my rest. How am I recharging? How am I recovering? And so I travel with a pillow. I travel with a sleep mask. I wear an Oura ring, which is a wearable that tracks my sleep. Before I go to bed at night, calculate when do I want to wake up? When can I make sure that I wake up at the right sleep cycle? Because if I wake up in the middle of a sleep cycle, I will be groggy versus if I'm in. And so it's because if your brain is tired, or I mentioned this a little bit before, If you are in survival mode, you cannot dream, you cannot problem solve. And when you are in survival mode, it's because you either have chaos, stress, or you were lacking in sleep. And I come from this place of I worked in morning TV and morning radio for years. I was the person who would brag about how I don't need sleep. I can do 2 hours. I would be at the club, and 2 hours later, I would be in my morning show seat telling the story of this crazy night that I had and all the people who I met. And now I realize like, oh, wow, I was living in tunnel vision and I had no idea. So it's absolutely sleep. I don't drink, especially when it comes to work trips. Every now and then, I might have like a glass of wine for a toast. But when I asked myself, what do I need to be on my A game? I realized, oh shit, like if I go out drinking on a Friday, I feel that on Saturday, I feel that on Sunday, and I'm still even a little groggy on Monday. Right. Or I eat like crap on Saturday, and then when I eat like crap, I want to eat more of that on Sunday. And it's a domino effect that I end up living half of my week in my C or D game. And that is not a net neutral that I want to be able to get to that next level. And so for me, it's not drinking, especially when I'm traveling. It is being obsessed about my water intake and hydrating, because that too is like energy first, productivity after that. It's making sure that I'm working out and that I'm really conscious about what I eat. I track everything that I eat. Previously, in certain seasons of my life, if I had disordered eating patterns, I could not do that. So I think it's important to recognize, like, you need to do what's healthy for you, but I've gotten to a place where I can listen to my body, and I want to make sure that I'm eating enough, because I got to a place last year where I was traveling so much, I was eating all of the things because I could not keep weight on, and I became that annoying person where I couldn't keep weight on. But if I'm traveling out of a suitcase and my pants are falling down on stage, that's not a good look. Like, I can't go buy new pants. But what would happen is I would eat everything, but what I was eating and the quality of what I was eating was not nourishing my body. So it's not about how many calories, it's what are the nutrients that I'm putting into my body, what's the protein that's supporting the muscle for my body. So to keep me on my A game, I'm working myself from the inside out. And then it's also, I have an actual habit tracker that I go through every single week. Every Sunday, I put what are the 10 habits that I need to support my week. And they might not necessarily be daily. So for example, this week, one of the things I had was I lift heavy. And my goal for the week was 2. So then I predict, okay, 2 times a week. Or it's I go to church and I take notes. Doesn't matter if it's Sunday or whatever. It's one time. Okay, when am I going to do that? I drink 100 ounces of water. I get 10,000 steps in. But I really track my habits because there were so many times in my life where I thought I was taking care of myself. But when I actually put pen to paper, I realized I was maybe doing it 40 or 50% of the time. And 40 or 50 out of 100%, that's not A game status. So it was having to have a healthy relationship with tracking. And I have really been super conscious about that so that I can maximize my time and be more proactive with my type B visionary brain that loves to just, yeah, no, it's cool. Like, you want to climb Mount Everest? Let's go. Like, we could do it. Like, we could, if we have to drink our own pee, that's fine. Like, we'll find people to give us jackets. Like, it's cool. Like, no. Hold on. Like, how can we make it so that we're sustainable for a long period of time versus constantly living in a state of sprint?
Right.
I can't do that anymore. But sleep ahead of everything. I believe even sleep over mind and even over spirit, because I don't feel like I can get my head right or even get my spirit right if my recharge is.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
That's super good. I'm just coming out of that. I had a little baby that would wake up twice throughout the night, every night for a year and a half. It's exhausted. It's awful. It's hard to operate. I love that. That's really good.
And that's its own thing. I'm like, I don't have the newborn. I don't have, like, I can track it in a certain way. It's also though, like with some of my mom clients where I'm like, I understand you're sleeping. Like, I don't understand, but you're sleeping training or you're getting up with your baby. And also, if you can't get that, how are we taking care of ourselves?
Right.
How are we asking for help?
Right.
What can we do using what we have? And even just asking that question, forcing your brain to take other potential directions to be
100%. I think the other important thing is for parents, like, everything's for a season in parenthood, right? Like, when you're in it, it feels like forever, and then all of a sudden you're out and it's something else. So that's important to note. Anybody that wants to follow you, work with you, what's the best way to find you?
Find me on Instagram. That's where I'm constantly checking the DMs. We met on TikTok, but I feel like that's where I'm the most active. I love having conversations. I love answering questions. I love getting inspiration for content, but Instagram or GiselleUgarte.com, we'll keep the conversation going there.
Okay, we'll have your
Yeah.
links in the description. Thank you.
Thank you
so
for
much.
having me.
is
This was
amazing.
such an unexpected conversation. I'm like, Mikey, like what did I sign up for? Like hold on. Was this therapy for a second? But I hope it inspires and helps people and helps you to see things a little differently, at the very least, that you feel a little lighter.
I think there's going to be a lot of people that this helps 100%.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.